watching the recording. I hope you enjoy it. The topic, as you know, today is around our model and our steps for gaining buy-in and participation for any type of change or transformation in an organization, macro, medium, micro. We'll get into all that in a minute. Again, you can learn more about Taking Point Leadership at our website, takingpointleadership.com. Also sponsored by our new e-learning platform, Taking Point Academy. So you can go to takingpointacademy.com, and our flagship product is a change leadership certification course. So much of what we're talking about today is centered around one of the models we have around how to communicate effectively when you're trying to gain as much participation and buy-in for change. Now, what we see in the data always comes back the same, whether it's McKinsey, Deloitte, whatever, usually around 2/3 to 70% sometimes of change initiatives. I don't want to say fail, but as we know, fall significantly short of meeting their intended objectives. One of the many reasons, of course, is the lack of buy-in and participation. So we'll talk a little bit about why there's a lack of buy-in and participation. Then we'll get into the latter part of the presentation on how to overcome those obstacles, those barriers, those behaviors, that mindset of people in the organization, how to increase engagement, increase participation, and increase the likelihood of success for any type of change initiative. Could be a small project, could be full-scale global transformation of the company, of the organization, but we'll get into that here in a few minutes. Please do ask questions in the chat feature, because we do want to answer any questions that any of you guys have while we have your time here very briefly for the next 20 minutes. I wanted to take it way back about 22 years or so, and talk a little bit about the full scale and what became an ongoing organizational transformation initiative in the special operations community. So when I started doing research for the first book, Taking Point, which is a book about organizational change and how to gain buy-in, participation, and succeed at change, I started reading books about change management, essentially. So John Kotter's Leading Change, and then I found Stanley McChrystal's Team of Teams. And he did a lot of research. Obviously, he experienced it and led it, but he put a lot of this content in his book around looking at, kind of in a case study format, what organizational transformation looked like in the military, but predominantly he was focusing on SOCOM and a lot of the challenges that we faced in the post 9/11 reality that we had moving into this battlefield against a very dangerous and decentralized enemy, while we're still a large, slow-moving cruise ship, and we had to become more nimble, more adaptive, and go through what became a series of essentially ongoing transformation initiatives. And seeing as how you served for like 150 years in Naval Special Warfare, I wanted to get your, that was a joke, sorry, you can laugh, that's fine. I wanted to get your thoughts on what you saw post 9/11. I know we served together, obviously, at SEAL Team 5. We're on the battlefield together, but then in your continued on another 15 years in the service, what has your experience been in leading change? And more importantly, what challenges have you had to overcome when it came to gaining buy-in and participation for very, very important transformational initiatives?
So I'll go back just a slight few years even before that. So what I found very interesting is if you were to look at the SEAL teams across the East and the West Coast, they were fundamentally individual entities. And what I mean by that is like each team had its own region that it utilized and trained for, right? And so because of that, there was a lot of misalignment. And so for example, I was at SEAL Team 1, and then we also deployed with SEAL Team 5. However, when we got together, we couldn't work together. I mean, it was just because we had, different calls.
You were No Fun 1, and then we were awesome.
Right, exactly, right. Totally. And so, well, this again was early on before you got there, but it was kind of like we just couldn't work together because we were misaligned as far as calls, decisions, how we did things, and even everything from processes to how we did tactics and procedures and everything else, right? And so we saw once we started to realize that, and it had been going on since Vietnam, and somebody, like you said, they made a decision on we need to align the teams, right? And so they went from the individual training commands into the big TRADETs that we have now, which everybody started going through the pipeline. Everybody got the same training and things like that. But when that first came online, there was a lot of hesitancy, right?
Right.
There was a lot of people that were just kind of like, I'm not sure if that's going to work. I don't really like that model. We've been doing it for so long. Again, it was kind of like they were in those entrenchmental models on how they do things they had a lot of, I'm not going to say power, but they had a lot of input on what was being taught and what was being trained, right? And so there had to be a transformational shift in the way that we thought and how we did things. And so, we started to go through that process. I believe it was called Force 21, where we started to implement a lot of those changes. We started to build the tradettes, and we started to, utilize and build those pipelines. And I think what we found as post 9/11 was that was a great thing, and people started to realize that. Even during the process, the buy-in was still kind of, some people are like for it, some people weren't, some people always talked about the old days, so there was still that core group of individuals that were like, they weren't the change evangelists, they were kind of like the individuals, well, I liked it the way it was. But once they started to realize, that we could start integrating with all teams, meaning everybody on the West Coast could fly in, land, and people could start automatically operating with one another regardless, because, the tactics, procedures, all that stuff, the training and everything else, was, par across the board as far as how each, and then, I think even on top of that, we were starting to able to, train even just outside of that and go further on into the tier 1 areas and stuff like that. And so I think that was super important, to have that buy-in, even though, you did have some resistance, you started to get a lot of change evangelists, and eventually, people started to realize this is a good thing. We can augment at any time. People were like in the middle of their workups, and you were able to deploy them downrange and augment another team. And so people started going, oh, wait a minute. This is good for me. This is a great thing. I can start going downrange, even though I'm in a workup. If they utilize my skill, they can take me out, sit there for a month, and so on and so forth. So that was a big part of it. But the buy-in came, and then, like I said, you were a part of that. And then it only got better, as time went on.
I remember one of the more uncomfortable elements to that change was all the way down to our talent acquisition strategies. So being the secret society, the silent warrior mindset had to shift quite significantly if we wanted to get out there and attract more talent, because with having one of the most challenging training and selection programs in any military in the world, you have to put better candidates in the top of that funnel, which requires a very proactive talent acquisition strategy, not just assuming people are going to find us and know about the organization. I'm talking NSW specific. And a lot of people did not like lifting the veil of secrecy, and that took years. And still, obviously, a lot of people are uncomfortable with that, but we were getting better candidates lined up out the door because of many of those initiatives that were enacted successfully, even though a lot of that buy-in and participation wasn't initially there. But as we were going to talk about, you start to see progress, you start to see success in these change initiatives, you celebrate those wins, communicate how and what you're doing across the organization, why it's working. Then some of the naysayers start coming to see the light and either participate or just get out of the way. Either works. Participation is better, but also if you don't want to participate, just close your mouth. The disagree and commit mindset, which we'll talk about here in a second. So I want to get into the model itself. So let's go ahead and pull up the slide. We have developed a model proprietary to Taking Point Leadership, which is part of the Change Leadership course at takingpointacademy.com. But what we want to talk about today is one of the most effective models we developed and implemented is around the communication strategy and initiatives and the 6 steps and elements, pillars really, to how to gain buy-in and, most importantly, the active participation and engagement in those change initiatives. The first is awareness. So when we talk about awareness, we're talking about really commander's intent, right? Would you say that's probably the best way to put it? I think so. So you want to talk about the what, you want to talk about the why, and really what does the winning outcome look like? What is most change initiatives and organizations are designed to create some sort of positive outcome. We're not trying to make the organization worse. We're trying to make the organization better. So understanding commander's intent, the what, and most importantly, the why. The why is where you gain that buy-in, and what does winning look like? And also, conversely, to a degree, what are the risks for not participating in change? What negative impacts is that going to have on the organization? The next is looking at aspiration. So how do we take awareness and then transform that into aspiration that goes into the vision for change? How do we make change successful? What does the vision look like? And not just the long-term element of success, but how do we make that measurable? How do we make the change initiative measurable down to the vision, and looking at explaining resources, being transparent, and also if it's an initiative that's going to happen either way, making sure that everybody understands that you will participate or you need to get out of the way. The change bus is leaving, so get on board, get in the right seat, participate, grab an oar, whatever it is, if it's a boat, obviously, and then do so or don't. What do you think about those first two? Awareness and aspiration. I mean, that's where you really start to get people looking at what the vision is and starting to transform their mindset from this is the way we've always done it to we need to change and move in the right direction. One of the things is looking at really explaining, the what. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What is the purpose behind this change initiative? Again, it could be something small like a project. It could be something macro like a full-scale organizational transformation like we're talking about in NSW, or a large organization, even a small organization that's growing, that's scaling, that's trying to become profitable. But then you got to get into knowledge, like creating knowledge and understanding around what roles and responsibilities are going to be part of execution on that vision. And this is where strategic planning comes into place, and putting committees together, or transformation task forces, we call them, in organizations that will be accountable for driving those different change initiatives at various levels of the organization. And the committees and task force, really, it's their accountability to ensure they create not just the awareness and aspiration, but the knowledge and understanding of what the roles are, the responsibilities, so role clarity, expectations, and then also looking at clearly presenting and training the process on the procedures, the new tools. It could be rolling out a new software platform or CRM. It could be a new procedure to help the organization change. Let's go with a skill, because knowledge and skill, when it comes to successful change, are two different things. Skill is around training. One of the areas I failed as a leader in the past in the previous organization that I was running and that I created was we were going through a major transformation to capitalize on the growth we were having, but that included a lot of digital transformation for that organization. A lot of organizations have gone through and are going through a lot of digital transformation. So new technology, which requires a lot of new training. But when we implement new technology, for example, without the training, you're not going to get the buy-in, the tool won't be utilized, and your change initiative is either going to fall short or fail completely, having spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of resources that won't actually positively impact the organization. The next is around accountability. So a lot of organizations talk about accountability, but really accountability is a byproduct of a great process. Of great procedures, of following process and procedures, clear roles and responsibilities, understanding the skills that are needed, the who, the what, the when, dates, names, times, everything on whatever the project is or series of projects associated with that change initiative. This is where a lot of change initiatives fall short. They have a lot of success in creating awareness, gaining a lot of buy-in and participation from not everybody typically, but the vast majority of appropriate people and groups within an organization. They have the knowledge, they have the skills to successfully implement the change on a micro and macro level. There's accountability, and then they think they're at the finish line, but they are not at the finish line. They're 70% of the way there, typically, is when we see organizations start to experience backsliding. Because they don't create sustainability and long-term accountability when it comes to ensuring that the change initiatives actually stick and are implemented by everybody across the organization in a consistent long-term manner. And otherwise, when things like that happen, because change is hard, typically takes a lot longer than we anticipate, more significant hard and soft costs than we anticipate. Therefore, people start experiencing change fatigue. You got to pay attention to burnout and things like that. So even sometimes your early adopters or change evangelists, as you referred to them earlier, start to step off the battlefield, if you will, when it comes to participation, because maybe they're not seeing the progress, or they think they're at the finish line and they're not, so they pull back because they've experienced a lot of extra work, extra stress, extra anxiety, and that's where it ends, and that doesn't create sustainable change. A few of the ways that we always teach organizations that we work with all over the world is simple things, but they have to be done correctly, is identifying and celebrating wins. So having very clear KPIs along the way and various milestones to understand when you can even manufacture something to celebrate, and then communicating across the organization the progress towards change so people actually see it. So you have your highly engaged participants, you have the people in the middle who are sitting on the fence and waiting and to see if there's going to be progress. And then you have the people who are the agitators and are pushing against the change. And the people in the middle who are waiting and the agitators need to see that progress. They need to see very tangible and visible signs that progress is being made towards that change initiative so they can either get out of the way, like I said before, or get on the bus and help drive that initiative all the way forward. So celebrating wins, purposeful storytelling around celebrating wins, not just good job guys, but telling stories about who created that win, what values of the organization were associated with creating that win, how they got there, the impact it has on the long-term vision for change, and then continuing to show the behaviors necessary, which is critically important, the behaviors and the impact those positive behaviors had on driving that change initiative. And then you can continue to maintain momentum across the organization, again, combating burnout, combating change fatigue, and driving sustainability. Matthew, can you hear me? No, okay. Well, that is about all the time we have today. Hopefully you guys got a little bit out of that. If you are watching this as a recording, please do reach out to us if you have any questions. You can learn more about the organization at takingpointleadership.com. Go to our resources page. We have ebooks on the topics. We have dozens and dozens of Forbes articles on change leadership that we've written over the years. Please do sign up for our newsletter. So we're pushing out more content every month, every week. And of course, that's where we're going to find out more about our YouTube live sessions. So thank you so much. And of course, please do go check out takingpointacademy.com, sign up for the course. You can see the links in the chat here as well if you are watching this live. It's a great program, very significant change management and change leadership course. You'll get a lot out of it. This is just a little snippet of what you're going to get. So thanks so much and have